I know, right? Hey everybody,
What's
how's it
up,
going? What's up, Facebook? We're just gonna see if it builds an audience before we begin. We just gotta get that sign because we might need to do this over, and we're not seeing that yet. So just hold on a couple more seconds.
There's a sign.
There it is. Yeah, one person's watching.
Oh,
yeah,
sweet.
sometimes it doesn't catch, sometimes it does. All right, you all, welcome back to Hive Live. I'm not even sure what town we're in.
Nice. We're in this town called Cortland.
Oh, Cortland. We're in Cortland, New York today. My name's Sage Hayes. Really happy to be with you today and super grateful to be with Rusia Mohiuddin.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, Rusia Mohiuddin today in Cortland, New York. We're going to be talking about embodied liberation, sustainable movement building, and hopefully kind of staying sane in the body during these times. So welcome, y'all. We're really excited to have you with us, whether you're joining us live or you're joining us sometime in the future. I've been really excited about this interview. I've been really excited to sit with you because I'm so honored your work that you've done and the organization that you run and the trainings, and I'm so excited to get the word out about more people need to know what you're doing in the world. So maybe you could just introduce yourself first, and we might be able to touch in on kind of this particular day of coming together. But I just want you to say hi first and tell us who you are a little bit.
All right. Well, thank you, Sage. You're far too kind, and I appreciate it. I'm very excited and honored that you've asked me to do this in the launch of your directory, which I think will be incredibly important. Just in general, but particularly in the next 4 years, starting today. Actually, starting now. Wow, are we in the first few minutes of the Trump presidency?
I might ask you just to speak up a little bit.
Sorry.
Too. No, that's okay.
Sure. My name is Rusia. I'm the principal of Universal Partnership, which is a fancy term for a national consulting practice that I run with various nonprofit organizations across the country that want to do, mindfulness work, leadership development, organizational development, basically in part or in whole, like organizational shifts, movement shifts around the work that they're doing. In one fell swoop, that's like the broadest way to describe my work.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to get a lot more into that. But before we do, one thing I know about you a little bit, not because we've talked about it, but from looking at your website and reading a little bit more about you, is that you come from a pretty deep lineage of a history of social movements.
Yeah.
Not only probably your personal history, but your familial lineage. And maybe would you be open to just sharing a little bit about kind of the backs that you stand on? That would be amazing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good.
Well, I am originally from Bangladesh, which is, I don't know, most people know what Bangladesh is. Maybe not like millennials because it's less, sexy to know about that stuff. It's a small country in Southeast Asia that borders India and Burma. Most folks know that Bangladesh was a part of Pakistan and then was formerly, before it became the Republic of Bangladesh, it was East Pakistan. And before Pakistan was a part of India. So historically, if we think about the shaping of Bangladesh, it was colonized by the British, then we were colonized by India, it was colonized by Pakistan, and then eventually in 1971 there was the War of Independence. And a lot of sort of my ideology around people and change and sort of justice comes from my family, particularly my mother's side of the family. And I think my mother's paternal grandmother was a very big sort of presence in the part of Bangladesh that she lived in, and she sort of did a lot of social justice work. She sort of informally created a lot of social services for the people in her village. She would feed people, house people, and my mother, when she was very young, for political reasons, was sent to live with her grandmother, her father's mother, because my grandfather was a revolutionary during the war so the struggle to secede from India and then the struggle to secede from East Pakistan. My grandfather was a historical, pivotal political figure then. And he, like most political figures during civil strife, he was under a lot of threat. And so there was a threat that came and said, Mushur Rahman, which was his name, is also known as Jadumia, which means magic man, because he could talk to one person on the street, and before you know it, there would be hundreds of people just like surrounding him. I actually there's a series of pictures that shows that. That's how I know it. Nobody told me these stories, but
that's nice. You have the pictures.
Yeah, it's actually pretty amazing. It always gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, I could feel that.
But they're like, hey, we heard you had, people were like, we heard you had a daughter and we're going to get her, right? So my mother is the first of 11 children that he had. And to protect her, but also to, basically to protect her, she got sent to his mother's.
Okay.
And so my mother obviously is a huge influence in my life. And she learned all this stuff and sort of really grounded her political analysis and ideology from her grandmother that then she passed on to me, and then obviously from my grandfather, who really was like, he says the source of all power comes from the people, right? And I really believe that, like deeply, deeply, deeply believe that. And he came from a lot of privilege, but that always came secondary to him. And sure, that's a choice that he can make, but it's the right choice for someone in his position to make. And he sort of passed that on to my mother, and then my mother passed that on to us. So a lot of my understanding of people, a lot of my understanding and belief in people and the ideology of how what makes for a just society, what makes for a just peoples, comes from this political work that my grandfather did that then my mother carried on. My mother was actually the first. She was a member of parliament in Bangladesh, and she won in a section of Bangladesh where a woman had never run. Wow. So I owe all my badassery to my mother. Like, she's pretty badass.
Yeah. I think it's so, for me, it's so unusual to meet people of my age that come from such a rich lineage of liberation, of organizing, of revolution.
Yes, and, because...
And probably as a white person, I can say that, right? Because I'm mostly around white people. I think if I was of color, that would probably be a bit different.
Sure. I mean, I think if you look at the history of the United States, right?
Yeah.
It's 200 years old. Yes, it was violent, but the government here has been established for, a few hundred years, right? Almost a few hundred years. And Bangladesh got its independence in 1971. So it's not a horribly long time.
Yeah.
Right? And I think a lot of developing countries have this kind of status, right? Like, it was colonized, and the struggle for independence comes a lot later than how we sort of understand it here in the context of where we live here in the United States.
Yeah.
And it's deep. Like, I know a lot of people who sort of migrated here or are first generations of folks in the United States, and they have similar sort of like, this is the revolutionary struggle that I come from. And, our movements in this country are deeply influenced by that. I don't think we necessarily sort of, give voice to it and shine a light to it. But you know, if I didn't have this rich sort of lineage, you know, I had enough privilege where I could do anything I wanted to do. I could have been a lawyer, I could have been a doctor, which my parents would have loved because they're South Asians, and there's like a certain amount of professional careers that sort of are valued. But I chose to do this, like wholeheartedly chose to do this. Yeah, this type of work, social justice work. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Now let's talk a little bit about kind of that choice and like maybe when you made that choice, maybe what your vision was. Just tell us a little bit about kind of your initial opening into organizing Universal Partnership and you know, kind of what your vision has. Maybe is your vision the same as it was, and yeah, just maybe talk a little bit about the beginnings of Universal Partnership and what it, you know, what that was like.
Sure. So I started up, I think it's almost been 5 years now. I think we might have just surpassed the 5-year anniversary. And it's the idea of, I'm just going to keep it real.
Please.
Like super real and honest.
I think everybody
with everyone out there
people
too.
Like, see, like, yeah, a little hard on that one.
Give me the honesty.
Yeah, totally.
You know, I co-founded and I worked in a national intermediary for 6.5, 7 years.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, the timing of doing that work was it was needed. We didn't know that it was needed, but it was needed, and it blew up and it got really big, and the work was amazing. I learned a lot from it, and it was very traumatic because I found that there were places where I was compromising where I didn't think that I should have to compromise. And I was compromising doing the work with people who were, you know, talking the talk, but not necessarily walking the walk. And
do you mean compromising your morals? Do you mean compromising your health? Like, what do you mean by when you say you're compromising?
I was compromising the values and principles that I base my work on.
Okay.
And it didn't feel like a huge compromise then because it was like, this work really needs to be done, so I'm going to do it. And then, you know, it sort of hit a crescendo of like, who's doing this? What work am I doing? Who am I doing it with? What am I having to give up in terms of like my idea and my assessment of like how a particular piece of work needs to be done? And that piece of work could affect like 80 people, right? And there was just a lot of like internal misalignment. And I realized that I have a deeper purpose that I'm connected to in the work that I'm doing. And it's based on two things. Okay. One, my own change process, which is actually processes because it's a lot. Yeah. And it continues to be a lot, and I'm grateful for it. And then the other thing is that the change processes that I've sort of witnessed, supported in the 11 plus years that I've been doing sort of mindfulness transformational work in the movement, and I didn't want to compromise anymore. And so, I created Universal Partnership as a way to really live in the truth of what I believe and what I've experienced and witnessed, to be able to create freely without having to compromise or to adjust to how other people do it, or, what happens mostly is other people's egos. I don't want to have to interface with that. Yeah. And so UP is really just a manifestation of like my deeper belief of how the work needs to be done. Is it the only way? Absolutely not. Is it right? Not always. Yeah. But it's right in terms of my analysis and the deeper understanding of that I have around how change happens.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Sure.
Some of those principles, some of your analysis about how change happens, and just a little bit about, like, just maybe talk a little bit about what that means to you.
Yeah. I mean, universal partnership over the first several years, I was sort of like testing and piloting what's going to work.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, and I created a lot of different sort of tools and exercises to really engage people, but without having to sort of inundate them with like a lot of terminology, a lot of like, hey, you have to understand this to actually understand how change happens. I'm like, no, well, what have I learned in my own change processes that are really key, right? And what are the foundational practices that got me there?
Yeah.
And sort of I use that as a springboard to sort of develop really creative ways for people to look at what are their values and principles.
Yeah.
Not just what folks espouse out in the world, because we all have most of us have a public persona, right? Like the way we are out in the world and what we say and how we say it and what we do and how we do it. And then there's the more intimate way we are with our family and friends. And I think that's normal. And so my work really looks to like, well, what are the values and principles that's present in both of these worlds for folks, for myself, and how can we align that, deeply, acutely align that with the work that we're doing? So the change work is like really being able to talk to people about, hey, you want to change the world?
Okay.
But like, it's not, when we say we want to change the world, we separate ourselves from it and it becomes all this external work. Right?
Yeah.
And we separate it, at least intellectually, from our intimate world.
Right. Personal and then our change work. Right.
And really the simple premise of like embodied liberation, which is the work that I do and the foundation of all the different pieces of like events and programmatic work that I do, is really based on the idea of embodied liberation. That in order to achieve external liberation, we have to cultivate those values and principles internally. So simply, changing you is actually changing the world, right? So we have a lot of folks, look, think about where we are right now, right? Like, are we 1 hour into the Trump presidency?
Yeah.
And it's already been scary and disastrous, since, November 9th, let's just be real, right?
Yeah, and
November 9th, 2016.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think we need to really look at what it's going to take for us to, one, sustain ourselves in a generative way, right? Where we are taking care of ourselves as a way of taking care of our community, as a way of taking care of the world. How many times I have to tell people you got to be alive to do this work? It's really like I'm amazed every time I say it, even though I've said it thousands and thousands of times.
You got to be alive to do this work.
People out there, you have to be alive to do this work. So you can't work yourself to death, because once you're dead, it's done.
Once you're dead, it's done. And alive being a very specific word.
That's right.
Right? Because there's a lot of, you can be living and do this work. You can be surviving and do this work.
Yes.
But alive is a powerful word there.
Yeah.
Right?
And it has many layers of understanding. Yes, you have to physically be alive to do this work, but you have to be spiritually alive, right? Emotionally alive, intellectually alive, creatively alive. Like all these ways in which we generate energy, we birth and sort of incubate and birth energy and this like creativity out in the world. We need that aliveness to do this work.
Yes.
And to do it effectively,
yes.
right?
Right.
Not that it takes us, 4 hours to do one thing because we're exhausted and burned out. But it takes us the requisite amount of time to do that one task because we have the energy and the focus to do it. And I think so much of, I know this because I did it, right? Like I was a frontline organizer for 8 years.
Okay.
In various organizations, mostly in New York. And, I used to sleep over. I used to sleep, in the office before a huge event.
Yeah. That's just normal.
I mean, it was normal, but it was exhausting.
Yeah, no, I meant
You know?
normal within the cultural norms of
Right.
organizing life or nonprofit life.
That's right.
Yeah.
Working 16-hour days,
Yeah.
you know, thinking like, oh my God, I gotta do it, I gotta do it, I gotta do it. And, you know, folks who know me know that I'm fairly meticulous in my work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very organized in my work. And I would, you know, begin every workday with a to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have a litany of shit that I had to do.
Mm-hmm.
Swear.
Swear away.
A litany of shit I had to do. And, you know, only 3 times in my organizing career, in 8 years, did I finish that to-do list. So no matter how much I get done in one given day, there's a million things to do the next day. And I want to be alive in all the meanings of that word.
Beautiful.
To do it the next day. And so my work is really about that. Like, what kind of resiliency, what kind of individual internal resources do we need to do this work in a way that brings us joy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We think about like, hey, you know, the next 4 years is going to be great. I actually think it's going to be 2 years. I don't think it's going to be 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to be in the doom and gloom. Like,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
The end of last year was really hard. It was really, really hard. I was scared, you know. I went to DC. I actually got a text at 4 a.m. on November 9th saying, Rusia, we really need you. Can you come down and do a session with the staff and do a strategy around immigration?
Mm-hmm.
And our staff and our members really need you. And I canceled the next day. I canceled Wednesday, got on a plane, and, you know, spent 2 days with these really amazing young, undocumented youth leaders who are devastated.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but be devastated myself. And,
Sure.
you know, later on Wednesdays when here's the plan for 100 days that we're going to do, like repealing Obamacare, repealing immigration strides. And people were like, you know, devastated and really, really scared.
Yeah.
And this is the work that I need to do. And I went there and I said, hey, you know what? We cannot it's normal for you all to take responsibility in what happened because that's how we take care of ourselves. We claim control in places that we don't actually have control in order to feel safe. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I failed. I called my mother and I told her that I failed. Like, DACA's under threat now. Deferred action for childhood arrivals. And DAPA, which is for the parents of those youth. And we did the kind of work, the internal work that they needed so they could clearly see what the strategy was. Because day one, people were stuck.
Yeah.
They're like, we don't know what the fuck we're going to do. We're screwed.
Yeah.
They had no idea what the move was around advocacy and policy work.
Right, so they were sort of personally stuck with fear, grief, terror, remorse, regret,
right,
sense of failure, and overwhelm from the...
Absolutely, and it's debilitating.
Right. Who wouldn't be stuck?
It was totally debilitating, but the work we did in one day...
Yeah, I want to talk about that, actually.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what is the work you do when you're debilitated, because I think a lot of people out there are working with debilitation, whether you're in organizing movements or you're literally... this is the first time you've woken up and said, wow, this is a shit show. And I'm really scared. I'm scared for my kids. I'm scared for the kids that I teach or my neighbors or, you know. So I think it'd be really kind of interesting and exciting to talk a little bit about going from debilitation to movement. That's not about fixing it out there. That's about working it internally.
Exactly. I mean, and that's exactly what we did. We allowed people... I mean, one of the few things that we did that was super powerful for this particular group of youth was the ability to say no.
Ooh. Yeah.
So folks really spoke into the space, like, what am I saying no to?
Okay.
What will I not... What are the absolute things that I will not tolerate in the work that I'm doing?
Okay.
Right? So it could be personal. It was personal. It was political.
Yeah.
Right? Like, no, I'm saying no to being rejected. I'm saying no to, like, feeling less than.
Yeah.
I'm saying no to all these stereotypes that are now all of a sudden being flooded about who I am and who my family are. And then, what are you saying yes to? I'm saying yes to my leadership. I'm saying yes to the power of our communities. I'm saying yes to, like, we're fucking here to stay.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of all of these are, like, intermixed with body-based exercises,
Okay.
which is a really big thing that I do in my work.
Yeah.
And it comes from somatics, which I learned from the Strozzi Institute, generative somatics, and a few mentors along the way, including Center for Transformative Change in Berkeley. You know Angel, right?
I do, yeah.
She's my partner in crime. She's badass.
I know, y'all together must be like...
It's magical. It's unicorn magic.
I believe that. No doubt.
Don't know. I don't take credit for it, but when we're together, it's like some good shit comes
Two
out of it.
masterminds with the hugest hearts coming together to do embodied liberation.
Yeah, you know, yes. I mean, that's another thing is, like, I think both of us do so much. We're deeply steeped in our practices.
Yeah.
And so we're good at checking our egos. So when we work, we just do the work.
Yeah.
Sometimes she leads a lot. Sometimes I lead a lot.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to go back to this piece around yes and no as a tool for people who are watching.
Yeah.
Because if there's any embodiment pieces and activities you want to add to this, I think it's great. But today's a great day for people to say, to make whatever way a list, or it doesn't have to be a list, but like, today, this is what I'm saying no to personally.
Yes.
This is what I'm saying no to politically. This is what I'm saying no to in my community. And then this is what I'm saying yes to. And even making a list of 1, 2, 3 things, you know, starts to, you know, we start to generate a little bit more agency about what's happening in our lives.
Right.
And clarity about what we are committing to.
Yes. I mean, I actually think today, folks should cut off from social media after this interview. And if you can, do very little work. Although a lot of people find resiliency in doing their work, I really think people need to do things that are going to take care of themselves, that like instantly bring them joy. So if you have a resiliency practice or a self-care practice, today is the day to like sort of immerse yourself in that.
Self-love, self-affirm.
Yes. One of my Facebook friends and a dear colleague of mine, it's like, you know, I wrote this sort of jovial post early in the morning saying, happy 45th inauguration day, and then ... just kidding, fight for your life. And so I guess people had to scroll to see that, which was the point. Right?
Right. Like,
I get a little delirious when I can't sleep at night, which is often.
Yeah, okay.
And she's like, oh, thank God you're kidding. This is so hard. It feels like I feel like I'm dealing with a death. And I told her that I loved her, because I do. And I asked her to, you know, not be on Facebook, because you're going to be inundated by all this new administration stuff and how scared people are, and it builds anxiety.
That's right.
Like, this is the energy that you are producing in your body. Like,
right.
Spend the day taking care of yourself.
Well, and spend the next couple of years taking care of yourself too.
Absolutely, but today particularly, like, do something that gives you instant joy.
Nice.
Because you don't want to start off the day one feeling totally, you know, under, right? Like,
totally.
Whatever, there's like a billion euphemisms we can say about how fucked we are, but like, start the day feeling really grounded.
Yeah.
Do something that gives you energy, that brings you joy. Watch a movie, eat food that, you know, something warm if you're in a cold place, that really, like, you can feel the warmth and love that's being generated inside of you. I'm going to spend the rest of the day today, you know, doing a little bit of work and then doing a lot of art.
Nice.
Right? I'm going to create something.
Nice.
That I'm going to bring something into existence that comes from my energy and my love. Because that's what's going to prepare me to get to where I gotta do. Yeah. And then in the subsequent days, be really clear about what your purpose is.
Yeah.
Be really clear about the vision that you have for yourself, for your community, and the work that you're doing. And then what are the values and principles that drive that?
Yeah.
How do you need to be in order for that to be successful. Not how other people need to be or how other people need to engage, but how do you need to be in order for that work to be successful? Because that's when you say these are the things that I'm saying yes to, and these are the things that I'm saying no to, very clearly by doing that work.
Right.
And I think the actualization of that we need to be more in practice of doing, because I know that people feel what's in their hearts, they know what's in their minds, but actualizing that in a practice really gives it power.
Yeah, can you just talk a little bit, for people who maybe aren't familiar with what a practice means, actualizing that in a practice, could you break that down a little bit?
Sure.
Thank you.
So a practice is something you do repeatedly.
Right. Practice, yep.
And there is a distinction, because we all do a lot of things repeatedly, right? We get up in the morning.
Right, we check our feeds. We
on our phones, brush our teeth. Those are all patterned practices that we do. We don't think about them. They're embodied. But the kind of practice that I'm talking about is something that's intentional.
Okay.
So I meditate every morning. I've been doing that almost for a decade.
Wow.
And I know when I'm going to do it. I know how long I'm going to do it. I know why I do it and what I want to get out of it. And I actualize the learnings from that by journaling every day too. So a practice is something that you intentionally do, hopefully daily.
Yeah.
But sometimes you do it weekly or a couple of times. Like working out is a practice most people intentionally do. The way that I think about practice on an individual level is that it helps disrupt patterns that I've embodied throughout my life, but also the way in which the world constantly tells me who I am.
Right.
That does not align with who I want to be.
Yeah.
Like practices disrupt those patterns.
Beautiful.
Right?
Yeah. I like how you're talking about that.
Yeah.
It's an intention, it's a conscious intention, a daily intention, hopefully, that literally disrupts things that are coming in that are not serving what your truth is.
Absolutely.
And finding a practice is your own personal journey, what works for you. Practices are practice. They're not always the thing we want to do.
Yes, your practice should serve you, and you should want to do it.
Yeah. Well, I just mean sometimes you get up and sort of say, oh, I gotta meditate, or you're like in.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I don't always want to go to the gym, but it is a practice to go to the gym.
Yes, I have a mantra around that.
Yeah, what
mantra
is it?
Something that I say to myself, which is, I love running. I do not love running. The treadmill is my best friend. The treadmill is not my best friend. So when I am on it, and I think it's day 7 now, this is the mantra I've been saying.
Yeah.
Because I've been watching the Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow show on the treadmill.
Nice.
Because previously had been sitting at my desk on the iPad or drawing and felt a lot of anxiety just weighing me down. I'm like, oh my God, no. I have to be informed, because we have to be informed. There's too much shit going on to not watch news and not be informed.
Right.
But I also don't want to feel the heaviness and the illness of having that stuff inside of me. So I'm doing that shit on the treadmill.
That's brilliant. I love that you that's part of what you're doing, because I think it's just this invitation is, if we are intaking, which it is our responsibility to keep up what's going on so we know how to act accordingly, but that energy of anger, rage, grief, sorrow, powerlessness that can come so quickly from some of what's happening, it is literally in our bodies. It's not just in our minds. Literally in our bodies.
Yeah.
And it is not the easiest energy to move with always.
No.
So, one really thing that could be helpful to think about if you haven't already is, how are you moving that energy?
That's right.
How are you moving it every day? And literally moving it, right? It doesn't have to be a treadmill. It can be walking. It can be swimming. It can be, it can be anything.
Absolutely.
But moving the body.
You must move the body. You drink a lot of water, because it's toxin. Your body, if you think about a little kid, right? A little child who's a somatic beast, right? Someone who's very in tune with what they're thinking, what they're feeling. Their emotions are all aligned. They haven't been sort of like spoiled by the world to become misaligned. Something happens and kids instantly cry.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I don't like that. I'm going to cry. Or like, oh, you said that and it hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I really want that. Even if it's like a temper tantrum, whatever it is, it's an expression and a release of the body.
Yeah.
Because the body builds up the energy.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, I'm done. Let it go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Through the body.
Through the body.
Right.
Through tears. They're like a great way to release toxins. That's why tears are salty. Right? That's why sweat is salty.
Yeah.
That's why urine, I imagine, is salty.
Totally.
We can ask someone in the White House what that tastes like, but I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, that's for those who read the dossier, and I'm one of them, sadly. But, you know, the point is that kids feel something, they generate the energy, and when they're done with it, they let it go.
Yeah.
Right?
Animals, same way.
Animals are exactly the same way. Shivering. You see animals that shiver. They're generating energy and then they're letting it go.
Yeah.
Right? We are actually taught through, soon as we hit institutions like schools, for example, we begin to learn how to armor ourselves. Like, oh, don't cry. This is how you should behave. There's all these restrictions that are put on us, and we begin to suppress that energy that our body has no more use for, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is that it literally lives in our bodies.
Yep.
So, like, where is the hardest part in your body? Feel around. Is it your neck? Is it your shoulder? Is it your back?
Yeah.
Is it
my
there?
shoulders?
Yeah, there's a part of your body that is hard, that feels harder than any other part of your body. And that is where all the energy that you
have not processed yet,
have not processed, have not released,
has not released.
That's where it goes to chill.
Yeah.
And it literally makes us ill.
Literally.
It literally makes us ill. So by our sort of physiological nature, what is natural to us is to have those emotions and then let it go.
Yeah. And your work with Universal Partnership, the retreats that you do, that I want you to talk a little bit more about, that the activities and conditions you set up with your work with organizations are teaching people about these fundamental aspects of embodiment, being able to touch in and start to learn how to move this sort of what gets stuck in the body and how to move with it. Really help people create some new choices.
Absolutely.
For that.
Absolutely. You know, one of the retreats I've been trying to get you to come to. One day the stars are going to align and it's going to happen.
Sooner than later, I bet.
Is Free Your Body, Oppression in the Soma.
Yeah.
There's our next retreat is March 13th through the 16th. We are accepting applications now.
Where is it?
It will be held at the Watershed Retreat Center in Millerton, New York. Really, really beautiful. A lot of people already know about it, but it's a super beautiful place, and it's we actually go back there for every single retreat because the environment is perfectly set up for the work that we're doing.
Beautiful.
And it's
conditions matter.
Yeah, the conditions, environment, it's just all, it fits perfectly with what we do there. And the idea is like, you know, what's in your body that's not serving you?
Okay.
What baggage have you been holding on and sort of interfacing and interacting with the people in your lives, the communities in your lives with, that you actually can and should let go of?
Okay. Right?
And this is where the sort of process of embodied liberation comes in. It's like, it's really the internal look, right? The idea that we continuously do our work where we hold up a mirror to the world and say, we need to look at ourselves. We need to look at what we're doing and how we can do differently. And this process is like, let's look in the mirror. Let's see ourselves in the mirror. Let's see our leadership and our relationships in the mirror and figure out, like, how do we actually need to change inside in order to be impactful in our outside work. And it's the idea of aligning your values and principles internally. Like, if I want to see X happen in the world, I have to create and cultivate and sustain that X inside of me first.
Right, like literally, I am the X. Right. I am the thing that I want. I am the values and the alignment. And I literally can experience that in an embodied way. Now, that's a very different way of moving through the world than most of how we're taught to, which is like, I want to do X, and my brain's going to lead the way. Like, I'm going to do these things, and it's a little bit more linear often, and it's kind of heady, and it doesn't often sort of, the full-bodied experience is not often, it's certainly not what has been safe for a lot of us, or even like a choice. We don't even know how to connect to it.
Yeah, and because the world continuously tells us that, this is who you are, and this is what you need, and this is what you don't need, right?
Yeah.
Inevitably, it says what we don't need, and it really crushes the idea of how change has been popularized. Like, oh, you do this one thing.
Yeah.
You have a New Year's resolution. You do it one thing, and boom, your life's different. Like, it's going to be awesome. But change is not doing one thing.
Yeah.
Well, change is doing one thing repeatedly. Right. And sometimes repeatedly forever.
And one thing that's deeply aligned to your values.
Yeah.
Not one thing to, I don't know, make you feel better for a little while.
Right. I mean, self-care, for example, self-care is a very popular term now.
Yeah.
I think it's hit the mainstream of like U.S. culture, right?
Yeah.
And I see people posting all the time or like talking about I went to the movies, self-care, hashtag self-care.
Yeah, yeah.
Or I got my nails done, hashtag self-care. And those are all ways that you take care of yourself. But it is not self-care.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
In the way that we really need to be thinking about self-care, right? Yeah. Self-care is the idea that you do something regularly, hopefully daily, at the very least weekly, that is your resiliency. You regenerate. It's the way that you give yourself sustenance every day or every week.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't do any other. It's like this one time. Like some people read, some people have like, I need me time.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, that it's an intentional practice that you do that takes care of yourself in a way that it regenerates all the output, right? Yeah. You begin to like, it's sort of like stockpiling, putting food in your refrigerator, right? You can't just go grocery shopping once and then have an infinite resources of food. Yeah. It's limited, right? It's very, I'm bumbling a little bit here and using sort of like very common examples, but it's really just that simple, right? I use art as a way of building resiliency. It's a way that I take care of myself. It's one of my self-care practices, and I feel it when I don't do it, right? Like I feel less creative. I feel less resourced. Yeah. And that's really the last part of it is like when you feel that your resources are low. Yeah. And your resources meaning like whatever gives you power, right? Like,
right. Your resources mean whatever gives you power.
Whatever it is.
Not what the mainstream says self-care is, not what you're doing or not what you're doing. It's like literally being able to take the time to explore what literally feels regenerating.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that you do it regularly. Yeah. Totally. Not like once in a while or like, oh, this is the first weekend I have off in like 2 months and I'm going to go watch a movie or get my nails done. Both of those things are great. You should do those. Yeah. As often as frequently. But it is not, here's the trap though, right? Okay. This is the trap that we have that I have to constantly fight against is the idea that self-care is like you can do this once in a while and you're taking care of yourself. Well, you're not taking care of yourself if you're doing it once every 3 months or once a year. Yeah. You should be doing it every day, even if it's for 5 minutes, even if it's for 10 minutes, something that you deeply connect with that gives you power, that gives you energy, that sort of aligns you with what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I just want to talk a little bit about that because I know that for a lot of people that are in movement work or in nonprofits and who are parents, and I mean, life is busy.
Sure.
And, I remember listening to a story when I was working at a nonprofit recently, doing a training, and this person had gone on vacation, and it was like their self-care thing, and they had waited 8 months or like a year to go on vacation. And so like using vacation as a tool for self-care, and that's only after they had been so burnt out and, feeling terrible. I mean, it was extreme. Like they had to take it at that point because their health was suffering so much. And I just want to say, like, incorporating so for that person, like, first of all, it's a shift of paradigm, right? Because definitely from older generations, it's like this whole different idea. Like it's like self-care is the reward versus the practice, right? So we're shifting the paradigm to a regular practice. And then we're also saying, like, I'd like to also say that, the transition to be able to make the commitment and then to practice regularly, it's a practice. Like it takes.
Yeah, it's a muscle.
It is not necessarily.
Build a muscle.
Yeah, it's like a muscle. Like it is not the easiest thing to do for many people, and the reward is great, but I don't know if you want to call it discipline, the commitment. When there's so many other things that are trying to get your attention, it is really a radical muscle to build.
It is, and I think there are a couple of really important things to know about that.
Yeah.
One is you're going to fail, and you must fail.
Yeah, nice.
Because you're going to learn something from failing that you're not going to learn if you never fail.
Yeah.
I always say in order for leadership to be really strong and courageous, that leader has to fail continuously. So you're going to fail and fail. That's totally normal and it's totally a part of the process. The thing to couple with failure is infinite second chances. Give yourself infinite second chances. Write it down. Remind yourself. Like,
that's so beautiful.
No one is going to do it for you if you don't do it for yourself.
Yeah.
So infinite second chances.
I love that.
Let every day be day one if it needs to be, because eventually you're going to do 2 days in a row and it's going to be great. But you'll get there when it's right for you. And we are not the culture that we live in, the global societal culture, both that and the culture of the United States tells us that failure is not an option. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like do it perfectly. We sort of like romanticized everything that success is, which is celebrity, money, power. Like we don't value anything else, right? As a culture.
Right.
And so we're constantly psychologically being told that failure is not an option. But we actually have to fail because we're going to learn something in that process that we're not going to learn any other way. And because failure when you're starting something new is inevitable.
Yeah.
Right?
It's inevitable.
Inevitable.
Yeah.
So if there's 2 things you're going to walk away with in doing new practices, whether it's self-care or affirmative practice to help you sort of align with your yeses and your nos, fail and fail often and give yourself infinite second chances.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. I like both of those because, again, one of the bigger themes in all of these conversations I'm having with all the different, vantage points is how do we keep reducing shame, right? Because failure and not getting it right and not being able to keep up something, then we feel like failure and then we feel shame, and shame then just kind of comes in and debilitates us. And infinite second chances is like freedom.
Yeah.
Right? It's like this beautiful, beautiful permission to say you're going to fail and let's try it again. And
we have to keep reminding ourselves of that, right? It's not something we say to ourselves once. We have to keep telling ourselves that we're going to fail and we need to give ourselves infinite second chances because the psychological attack that comes subtly and not so subtly from the world we live in doesn't come once. It's continuous.
Yeah.
Like it's continuous.
Yeah.
And so, having mantras, right? Like the things we say to ourselves. We talk to ourselves more than anybody else talks to us. We believe the things that we tell ourselves, and it comes from like a historical shaping from like who our parents are, who our family are, who our friends are, where we live. Like they are constantly telling us stuff, and we are constantly repeating it. So when we want to disrupt that, when we want to disrupt those patterns, we have to disrupt just with the same type of continuous chatter. Otherwise, it just is what it is. It's the default.
Totally.
Right?
Believe me, I know. I'm driving around interviewing everybody. I'm like, half the time I'm like, why am I doing this? This is such...
Because it's amazing.
Thank you. Right, but that's what I have to say.
Yeah.
But that's it, I'm telling myself that all the time. Like, it's worth it. It's having impact, right? Because on default, it's just like, it's just like a mess.
Yeah.
So I think we're all in the same boat with... we're not all in the same boat, but we all have had conditioning that gets internalized, and then the tape just plays unconsciously.
We are all in the same boat, and it impacts us differently. And then there's like swaths of ways in which it's all the same.
Okay.
Right? Like, I'll give you an example. The oppression in the Soma retreat actually came to be from the work that I did for a year and a half. I was working with like different groups, but with a lot of young women of color, right? Like a lot of young women of color. I think there was like 50, 60, 70 over the course of a year and a half. And I was doing all this sort of like change work with them. And part of the change work process is like, what are your narratives? What are the things that you say to yourself, secretly or out loud in different ways? And all across the board, people were talking about a lack of self-love. Like literally, some of these young women could not say that I love myself as a part of their mantra to disrupt their internal narratives. They would cry. They would shut down. They couldn't say I love myself, or I am loved, or I am worthy. They literally could not physically say that. And I was like, wow, there's something really, really deep here, because all these women were from different backgrounds, right? Different access to power and privilege and education. And, if I look at myself, right, like I had a very happy childhood. I come from a big family. There are 4 of us siblings. My parents just celebrated their 48th or 49th marriage anniversary. I grew up with a lot of privilege, right? In the sense of I didn't have to think about the roof over my head or food or clothes. I got an education, and I still had the same narratives that all these other women had around lack of self-love, lack of self-worth. And really, this is about my dignity, how I see myself. And I was like, there's something here. There's this huge theme that women, particularly women of color, have been historically shaped and are continually shaped to not think about themselves from a place of power. And so the oppression in the Soma retreat is really about like, what are we being told? Yeah. What are the ways in which oppression is actually shaping who we are? And how is it traumatizing ourselves? Right? And then how does that impact our relationships? Both intimate and public relationships, right?
Sure.
And then ultimately the work that we do.
Of course.
So are we creating a world from this place of being told who we are that is not aligned with the kind of world that we want to create and not aligned with the vision that we have for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We are trying to birth a new world by being shaped by the very old world that we're trying to break free from. Yeah. It's sort of like the hamster wheel. We're not going to go anywhere. Yeah. This is why embodied liberation is so important. It's like, you want to change the world? Well, fucking change yourself first. Yeah. And do it so you feel all the joy that you're trying to create in the world. It's not about making you feel bad. Yeah. People cry at my retreats, and I think that's a good measure. I want people to cry because they're letting go of something that they wouldn't have let go if they weren't in that space at that moment with us, right? Totally. And it's not about we're gonna like take people apart and then like, all right, see you later. But there is a process of like reintegration, like Angel Angel Kyoto Williams, Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, talks about this at the retreat in a really great way that resonates with people. It's like, okay, let's figure out what the baggage is. What are the patterns that aren't serving you?
So powerful.
Let's explore a lot of ways in which you can practice to let those go. And we offer practices. And then we do a whole section where people develop practices, and then we talk about it, right? So it's not like figure it out on your own, but like here are some tools, and then figure out what works for you. Like let's stay in community. But she talks about reintegration, and the process of reintegration happens at the retreat. So people leave feeling like really connected to their power base, right? Like really connecting to like, I have now a very clear vision of the work that I need to do for myself in order to achieve my external vision, right?
I have a very clear vision of the work I need to do for myself so that I can manifest the external vision that I have. You know? And this is what we need to be doing in our social movements and in all of the places right now. I mean, beyond movements, in our healing work and beyond, in our homes, in our communities, in our relationships, being able to just, to find the way that works for you, for me, for each, you know, for your personal journey to do that work, which I feel is, it is embodied. It's like personal liberation. The more free I can feel inside is the more free world that I can manifest.
And you're more deeply connected to the external liberation if you know what it feels like on the inside, if you experienced it. Right?
I love that.
Because then it's not like, there's no compromising the societal liberation. If I am achieving and manifesting liberation on the inside, then I cannot compromise the external
It is inevitable. Right?
I cannot do it. I've actually helped forward external societal liberation, global liberation, by cultivating and sustaining and maintaining that for myself. I've helped that happen. And I know that I can't stop until that happens as well. Like all people are free.
That's right.
All people are liberated. And we do this. We do this work on a political level, right? In the movement particularly, we do this, but we don't connect it to the more sort of like intimate personal work. Like when we talk about racial justice rights, right? Like, we don't want white people to talk about black liberation, right? We don't, in the movement, we know that in order for black liberation, racial justice work to happen authentically, the people who are directly affected need to engage and take action, right? It's like what, you know, organizing is about. I can talk about welfare rights, but it's not the same as a welfare recipient talking about it and taking action, right? We do this all the time in our work, right? Like we don't talk about queer POCs and sort of like, oh, I'm going to speak. It's not advocacy, right? We're not doing that shit. We know that in order for the work, the issues, the campaigns to be powerful, people who are directly affected need to do that work.
That's right.
Because the power and the intensity and what that can accomplish is only a fraction if somebody else does it.
That's right. The potency is real in a way that...
So we know how to do it, because we do it all the time.
Right.
But we don't do it when it comes to our own leadership and our own, own intimate values, right? We're not saying, hey, you're going to do this work. You want to create a just society. You want to create a social... You want social justice, economic justice, climate justice to happen. But you're not doing the work that you need to do internally in order to make that work super effective. All my work posits is that you got to do that work first. And in doing that work, you're simultaneously doing the external work. And the external work is much more connected to your being and who you are.
And you're much more present in it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because
it's liberating if you just think about doing it. Imagine if you actually do it.
Right.
Yeah.
For folks that are sort of like, we're gonna start to wrap this up. Any like suggestions for like folks out there that aren't necessarily even a part of a community or that are like, I want to do it, you know, like any first steps? I mean, we talked about practices. Anything else that you would leave people with as far as things to start to move toward the work, you know, internally?
Yeah, I mean, look, traditionally there's like all these people that do sort of like Bruce Lee says, "As you think, so shall you become."
Mm-hmm.
Right? You are what you think. You are what you practice. There's all these like infinite amount of cliches, and
Right.
cliches are cliches for a reason
Right.
because they work and they're real, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if there's one thing that every single person that is watching or will watch this, what do you call this?
This
Cast?
this
Video?
broadcast.
Broadcast.
Sure, whatever.
One thing. I
Yeah.
ask you to do one thing is to come up with a mantra
Okay.
for yourself.
All right.
And it could be a deeply personal mantra. It could be a political mantra. It could be a professional mantra, whatever it is. But one thing that you can repeatedly say to yourself and that you do before any act of leadership. So my personal mantra, which I think I need to change because it's 2 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel a little separation from it, is that I am fearless radical love. And I say that to myself. I said it 3 times before we started this broadcast.
Nice. That's freaking awesome.
I say it 3 times before. I am fearless radical love.
Beautiful.
And it reminds me that I need to lean into difficult things, even though my instinct is to either be like, I'm going to stay here until you go away, or I'm going to be like, see you later, right?
Yeah.
That I need to lean into it and engage difficult things, even though I don't want to do it,
Yeah.
right? So
Totally.
it reminds me that I have to be that fearless radical love.
Right.
So develop a mantra for yourself. It's an I am statement, right? Something that speaks to a vision that you have for yourself, right? Like in 6 months, I want to be a better public speaker. And so do your I am statement as if you have already achieved that. You've done all the work that you need to do.
Right.
And say it to yourself as often as possible.
Huh.
Because the fastest way to change, and I know people are like, oh, I don't want the fast way. I want the way that works. Well, the fast way works too, because if you can experience incremental change, it actually, it inspires you to keep doing it.
Totally.
But the best way to sort of make somatic change, which is by adjusting what you say to yourself.
Yeah.
Change your narrative. Change one thing about your narrative. And you do it for 7 days straight, and I promise you'll feel a difference.
That's amazing. And I would just add, change your narrative, do your mantra for 7 days straight, and if you can, when you say your mantra to yourself or out loud, notice where that shows up in your body.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it's just like it's like embodied mantra.
Yeah.
Right? Just like
brilliant.
amplify it, potentize it, right? Because the more your cells are vibrating, the more your being is vibrating that mantra, the quicker it's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have it written on top of my computer so I see it. So write it around the place. Write it where you are.
Yeah, right.
And
reflect it back.
If it doesn't give you chills,
yeah,
change it.
If it
It's
doesn't
yours.
give you chills, change it.
Yeah.
That's
if it doesn't
good.
serve you, dump it. Move on to something else.
That's right. I love that. That's just a great mantra for life.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up. Tell us, so your retreat is coming up in March, 13th and 14th. How many times do you offer it a year?
I think it varies because the partner, Angel, who I do it with, is on the other side of the world, and she's a superstar.
Yeah.
So we are planning to do 1.0 twice.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a third time on the West Coast.
Cool.
But we have to work that out.
Okay.
And we're going to do 2.0. First time.
Next level.
Yeah, May. It's going to happen in May, 2.0.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm psyched to hear about
Yeah.
that. And we'll certainly post about that on the Hive directory. Your website is universalpartnership.com.
.org.
Universalpartnership.org. Anything else you want to say about your work coming up that organizations can connect with you if they wanted to have you come in and do some work around embodied liberation with their staff?
Yeah, I'm very accessible. There's a contact form on my website,
Great.
so
Great.
reach out.
Yeah, check out the website in general. It's amazing. Just a lot of good work that's been done. There's amazing testimonials actually for all your workshops that I really enjoyed listening to. People were inspired, new tools, new capacities to be able to understand how to move through the world in a way that is I could just feel so much power coming from the participants.
Yeah, they give me credit, but the credit really lies with them.
Yeah, well, it's a collaborative invitation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you, Sage.
Yeah.
I want to hug you. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've gotten a broadcast
Oh,
hug.
it's
Thank
the
you so
best.
much.
You're so welcome. It is like such an honor. I think your work is groundbreaking. It's pioneering, and I'm excited for the next. This work makes me excited to be able to walk into the next 4 years and to have some tools and to know that we have like lighthouses like you and your work that are happening. And that's what this is all about, is being able to bring the light in the dark times and in the dark places. So
I appreciate that.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
thanks for having me in your home. Thanks you guys for watching.
Thank you.
Tomorrow I'll probably broadcast live from the Women's March in New York City.
Oh, sweet.
No particular interview. I guess the interview is the march.
Right. Inshallah, that goes nice and smooth, and it's raucous and safe.
Exactly. Yeah, me too. So y'all take care in the next 24, 48 hours. Like Rusia said, self-nurture, self-love, make a mantra. If it doesn't give you chills, drop it, change the mantra.
That's right.
There's a lot of wisdom here. So y'all take good care tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow from New York City. All right, y'all, take care.
Thank you. Bye. Day one of kicking ass.
Day one of kicking